I was raised in a single-father family, and my father has been prone to illness since I was little, and we were poor. After graduating from high school, I started working to provide for my family. Every morning, amidst the echoing mechanical sounds that resonate and blend in with the noise, my heart aches as I see former classmates happily heading towards the university, a sight reminiscent of the past. Is my life just going to end here, in this factory? In such a gloomy mood, I watched my friends. Then, one of my friends noticed me and came over with a bright smile.
Hey, Jake.
When that unchanging smile was directed at me, I felt relieved. I still feel like I'm in the same world as these guys.
I didn't recognize you, Jake.
Yeah, you've aged a bit, haven't you? Working really does age you, huh?
My friend's innocent words pierced my chest.
Oh. We're gonna be late. See you, Jake.
I waved at my friends with a smile.
Hey, Miller, how long are you going to stand there?
My factory supervisor called my name, and I hurried back to work. I feel like their world is no longer one I could fit into, which gives me a heartache. Going back to work, amidst the simple tasks, I had developed a habit of constantly thinking about my own dreams in my mind. I had a dream too. I had a dream of becoming a doctor. My mother died from a disease when I was in elementary school. As a little kid, holding my mother's hand as she drew her last breath, I felt her hand was still slightly warm, and I couldn't help but think that she could be saved. She's definitely still alive. That's what I convinced myself of. Now, I understand that nothing could be done at that time, but back then, I thought, why can't we save lives that can be saved? Why are we giving up? This made me aspire to be a doctor someday. But as I grew older, I began to realize that my family was poor and that dreaming such a thing was impossible for me. I knew my life was beyond my control, almost as if I had given up. When I, exhausted from work at the factory, returned home, my father had prepared dinner for me.
Hey, Jake.
Hey, Dad? My father was the epitome of a good dad. He raised me single-handedly, worked tirelessly, took care of the house, attended school events. He truly gave it his all. It happened when my dad served me my portion of the meal.
Cough, cough.
With a big cough, my father began to clutch his chest and cough uncontrollably. Dad, you okay? He couldn't respond to my word, leaning against the table, and the glass on the table toppled with a clatter and fell to the floor. The shattered glass. I reached out my hand to my father who was about to fall onto the shards. Dad. But my hand didn't reach my father. With a thud, he fell onto the floor. I called an ambulance with trembling hands for my unconscious father. With a loud siren echoing, my dad received every desperate life-saving measures in the ambulance. When we got to the hospital, they immediately took Dad away, and I was left pacing up and down the sterile white corridors, occasionally stopping in front of my dad's room. What if my dad disappears in front of me just like my mom? Yeah, an ominous premonition kept crossing my mind. And that premonition came true. Now, I'm sitting here in my dad's funeral suit. To be honest, I can't remember much since the moment I was told at the hospital that my dad had passed away. I remember at least calling my grandma, but even now, looking at my dad's portrait, it doesn't feel real. Even though I saw his remains, it feels like my heart isn't here, as if it's floating. I was staring at my dad's smiling face in the portrait.
Jake, let your aunts take care of things.
Relatives are bustling around me, saying that my grandma couldn't come because she's in a nursing home with bad legs. I remember she cried a lot when I told her that my dad had died over the phone.
But what will you do, Jake?
You're working, aren't you?
We can't take you in.
What about the funeral expenses?
We'll use the cash gifts we received for that.
They must think I can't hear them. My relatives were worrying about whether I would be a burden or if they had enough money. I can take care of myself, I retorted, but only inside my heart. I don't have the energy to say it out loud. What comes to mind are the times I spent with my dad. My dad who would come to my open school day. He would make a lunch box for the sports festival even though he was clumsy. All he did was to make sure I was never inconvenienced. A single tear trickled down from my eye. Dad, I wanted to give you a break. Let me repay you. Just as I was thinking that, an old classmate appeared among the attendees. He bowed respectfully to me after clasping his hands together in prayer. Despite his respectful attitude, what I heard from him was cruel.
That guy's Poe, and now he's lost his family. What's he gonna do?
That's just tragic, isn't it?
No education, no parents. Right.
I felt even more dejected by their condescending words. I just wanted to say goodbye to my dad, but the noise was too annoying. It felt like it wasn't a farewell to my dad, but rather an exposure of how much I lacked. Is there anyone who will truly mourn for my dad? That's when it happened.
You're Jake, right?
When my name was called, I turned to the voice. There was a very refined gentleman who seemed out of place in my humble, impoverished home. He looked at me kindly and patted my shoulder.
You look just like your dad.
Then the man started to speak a little louder.
You see, I'm really grateful to your dad, Carter.
To my dad.
Yes, I transferred schools when I was in high school. The reason was that my dad's company went bankrupt and we ran away in the middle of the night. Because of that, I was bullied by my classmates and I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. But Carter was different. He always treated me without any prejudice.
I was intently listening to a story about my dad I never knew. It feels like it just happened yesterday. Here's how the man who was talking to me with such familiarity recounted his story. The man had run away during the night and moved to a rural area. Perhaps because it was a small town, rumors of his escape spread quickly throughout the community, causing his parents to lose their place of work and find themselves in deep distress. At his new high school, it seems his classmates had disparaged him as a coward and a pauper. During these hard times, my father, Carter, approached the man. They played together by the river like any normal friends, even went fishing. Realizing that the man's family was struggling financially, my father invited the man's family to his own home for dinner, and they spent a joyful time together. Despite being abandoned by their relatives, Carter's family treated them with utmost kindness, expecting nothing in return. Then, my grandfather found a place for the man's father to work. The man told me that my father and grandparents were the ones who had saved him. Tears welled up in my eyes. My father had always been a truly kind-hearted person.
I had always wanted to meet Carter, but by the time I graduated high school, he had moved away. I didn't know where he was, and I've been searching for him ever since.
I shared a story I knew. It was about a friend from Carter's high school days that I'd heard about from him. Wait a second, are you Mr. Williams?
Huh?
The man looked at me with wide eyes. My father often mentioned Williams when he talked about his high school days, so that's why.
You remembered after all this time, and yet I came to see you so late. I apologize for my tardiness. My name is Williams.
I'm Jake. I introduced myself to Mr. Williams a bit late. Then, With a bit of a moist gleam in his eyes, Mr. Williams spoke up again. This time, not to me, but to the attendees.
I've been here paying respects to Carter, but isn't this supposed to be a precious time to say farewell to the departed? I'm deeply hurt by the insensitive comments I've been hearing.
Upon hearing this, the people around immediately fell silent. Their shrugs and facial expressions said it all. They didn't care. Thank you. When I quietly thanked him, Mr. Williams looked serious.
I wanted to come here and express my gratitude. I owe my life to Carter. Therefore, Jake, I want you to let me thank you.
I couldn't understand what Mr. Williams was talking about. That's too much of an exaggeration.
If Carter and your parents hadn't helped my family back then, I wouldn't be here today. Carter taught me the importance of being kind and caring towards others. With those values, I started running my own business. Because I was always able to work compassionately, my business prospered, and I was able to repay my parents' debts. But all of this, it's all thanks to Carter.
I realized just how much my father meant to him. It made me proud of my father, and I was glad to be his son.
Jake, you really take after Carter.
Do you think so? People often tell me I resemble him in appearance, so I thought that might be it. But as Mr. Williams looked at me, he smiled kindly.
Just from watching you here for a short while, I can tell you're a really strong person who can quietly endure hardship, and you are someone who carries a deep kindness.
Mr. Williams said that and petted my head.
Jake, you did well. I'm sure it was tough for you being alone, but it's okay. I'm on your side.
Tears started to stream down my face. I see, it really had been tough. I had just been desperately concealing the fact that I had lost my father, forcing myself to stay calm. I was on the verge of breaking down from anxiety, but I ignored my feelings. From now on, would I be all alone? Is it not allowed to rely on someone? I was filled with such anxiety, and at the same time, I wanted to see my father and do more for him. Amidst these feelings, I was here. I shed tears as if to spit out the lump in my heart to Mr. Williams, who seemed to understand these feelings.
Thanks to Carter, I'm alive. So, I want to thank Jake. I want you to allow me to return the favor I couldn't do for Carter.
I didn't really wish for that and thought about refusing, but Mr. Williams didn't let go of my hand tightly. So, I decided to accept Mr. Williams's gratitude. From there, it was a series of events. Mr. Williams ended up paying for the funeral expenses. I said there were condolences, but Mr. Williams said, "Jake, you keep this money." And then, Mr. Williams did everything for me. I was really grateful for his thoughtful gesture. The heartless words of the attendees heard during the funeral were gone. And when I got to the crematorium, I saw my father's smoke stretching out into the blue sky. My father must have been worried about me too. But with Mr. Williams's gratitude, I felt truly refreshed that we had a good ceremony. Dad, it's okay now. I'll live positively. But Mr. Williams's gratitude was not over. A miracle happened to me. Mr. Williams offered to send me to college, and he said he would give me living expenses until I get into society and told me to quit my job. Mr. Williams supported me in the form of cheering for my dream. I felt like my stalled time was moving. I studied desperately so as not to betray Mr. Williams's feelings. I was also conscious of not indulging myself, saying, "This is really a miracle." And now I am studying at the medical school. I don't want to see children like me. I want to save people who lose their parents, give up their dreams, despair, and become lonely. I am just lucky to be able to spend my time like this. But there are people in this world who hit rock bottom. I want to give back more to those around me for the blessings I have. I think so.
Jake.
Mr. Williams. That day, Mr. Williams visited me after the college lecture.
How are you doing lately?
Mr. Williams, who is getting gray hair, was still unchanged in his elegant and gentlemanly behavior. Lately, well, the study is difficult, but I'm working hard.
Carter would be very happy.
Saying that, Mr. Williams smiled gently.